but I have a lot of experience recently speaking very closely to a really wide variety of employers about exactly how T-levels and industry placements benefit them, their key sort of priorities and perspectives, challenges, and what they really need out of T-levels and how they view them and how we can best sort of approach that. So that's why I've been invited along, I suppose. I'm also an advisor to the Department for Education and to the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education, and also an independent consultant. But I've got a lot of experience with skills initiatives, technical and professional qualifications, training. And yeah, right. I mean, T-levels is an area that I've been working on very closely with the department, with IFADE, with Ofqual. So that's my background. So thank you for inviting me along this afternoon. I keep missing the. So in terms of the strategic overview, I'm just going to have a look at various elements about promoting T-levels and securing industry placements, looking at the overall offer and its benefits. We can look briefly about effective employer engagement strategies and processes, both in terms of design elements and implementation. Look at how we sort of develop, manage and sustain employer relationships. Obviously, there's a lot of there's a need to sort of have immediate actions and sort of priority elements and its targets and various things, but we do need to be confident about taking a longer term perspective and having sustainable strategies and repeat business, and really meeting business needs and employer expectations. We'll look at some of the issues, challenges and potential solutions. We'll have some time for questions and comments. And then hopefully we'll be able to draw some conclusions, consider what your sort of priority next steps might be. So in terms of promoting T-levels and securing industry placements, a crucial point is really understanding the full sort of T-level and industry placement offer and its value to employers. Obviously also hopefully, well, and certainly to students. It's one of the most sort of distinct and valuable parts of the T-level, despite the challenge that industry placements might present in terms of, what we're going to talk about this afternoon. But I think we really need to sort of consider how we make the case, how we build the case, and how positive and valuable it really is. I mean, this T-level industry placements offer two things as far as my experience is concerned, and speaking to employers. There's this high quality, high flexibility technical support resourcing service. You've got these really advanced technical students. There's a long period of time that can be done really flexibly, which you're offering to businesses. They're advanced technical students with a lot of different skills, competencies, fully prepared to sort of make genuine contributions and make a sort of lasting impression and difference to pressured teams. And then you've got the longer term, sort of a cost-effective, fully supported talent development program, a selection and recruitment service. You've got this period where you can have these students in the organization. It's a no obligation sort of technical and organization fit trial. So I think there's a really good ways to positively present how important these are. So, I mean, obviously, it's easy to think about the challenges with IPs, but it's really important to frame it positively and point out that this has so much to offer in terms of that short-term business needs, longer-term talent development, selection, recruitment, and then there's all sorts of other options: solution to skills shortages, profile raising, promotional opportunities. This is a resource-based competitive advantages. There's an excellent means to improve diversity in programs with all of its benefits across organizations. So it's about building that case and framing all of what you do around this positive case. And I guess making sure that your staff fully understand the offer and the benefits are clear and they're clearly articulated for all. Do your staff have access to all of the relevant resources, guidance, and support materials? There is a really enormous wealth of fantastic resources and guidance and support available now as that's being produced. So that's excellent. And then I think it's important to consider the business context and why it's needed now. I mean, with Brexit, with COVID, with lockdowns, technical and supply chain issues, challenges, domestic production challenges, skills shortages, even unpredictable economic and labour market conditions, all of these actually increase the value and the need for flexible resourcing options and for more cost-effective resourcing options and innovative new talent development programs. So you can really start to work with employers to say, this is a service we have, we'll fully support it. This can be really valuable to these students who are excellent resource, they're highly committed and enthusiastic. Let's work together to alleviate pressures to provide these sorts of benefits. So I think presented appropriately, you'll have a high proportion of employers wanting to know, how can I access this technical support flexibly and quickly? How can I use and best sort of plan and develop talent, longer term selection and recruitment processes? So yeah, I guess it's all about rethinking and representing what you're offering. I think that's the key to your centre's success. You have a highly valuable service, you're offering a highly valuable business resource. These enthusiastic, committed personnel in training, advanced technical skills, flexible support, long-term talent development, and all of your strategies, processes, communications, collaborations, events should be framed in terms of this positive message, this collaborative, supportive offer about sort of a wider partnership with employers and industry. So yeah, I mean, there are just countless benefits which we'll run through, and they can be as extended as beyond just that sort of service that we're offering there. There's promotional activities for companies, co-branding, sponsorship. There's wider skills beyond the actual T-level specific ones. I mean, there's all sorts of case studies and examples that I've come across where students bring all sorts of digital competencies when that's not what they're necessarily studying, or they're not what they're there with, or communication skills. They add value in all sorts of impressive ways. There's corporate social responsibilities, there's fulfilling contractual obligations, and generally just alleviating pressures in specific projects, programs, teams and timeframes, meeting business needs. So that's fundamental, I guess, is just that sort of positive messaging and sort of pointing out that you've got a really valuable resource and service to offer. So in terms of design, I mean, you're going to have to consider how best to design, adapt your resourcing, your implementation, your strategies overall to meet your centre needs, your staff needs, your locations, your T-level provision. But in terms, I mean, I've got sort of key recommendations and key messages I think that are important. All of this planning and these models and these strategies need to consider the short, the medium, and the longer term. They can't just be about sort of doing everything we can to secure it, just a couple of placements immediately with no view to the future and the view to a more sustainable strategy and sustainable relationships. So you need to consider, yeah, your T-level rollout, your anticipated volumes, develop a clear, detailed and fully resourced employer engagement strategy, and then fully aligned with that, a really detailed communication strategy and all of the various communications channels that are necessary. So I'd say you need to start immediately, recognizing the considerable sort of, well, the urgency of planning and initial industry placement needs, but avoid any short-termism and develop longer-term sustainable strategies with ambitious and realistic targets and clear quality and success measures. I think it's important to design it as a whole organization approach, but at the same time, because everyone needs to be involved, everyone needs to be informed, everyone needs to be updated, and everyone needs to understand different roles. You need clear roles and responsibilities. There'll be designated resource. We're working very sort of continuously, I guess, in these roles, trying to generate leads, trying to make the right contacts and things. But then you need timely sort of interventions, full support at very senior levels and leadership. So you have to think about exactly how you're going to use that most sort of effectively and efficiently, and how you're going to work together. Designated staff, but a whole organization approach. I think that's really important. Centralized employer engagement model, but full participation and communication. Clear accountabilities, adequate resourcing, specific responsible staff, consider the use of industry placement officers, consider your targets, your methods, training and support needs. Do you need staff with more direct industry experience or with some sort of recruitment type experience. Is that useful? Think about, as I say, the staff at different levels of your centre. It really needs to be efficient, well-targeted, and sort of resourceful. Think about who does what when. Strategic engagement, at what levels, leads and opportunities, all levels. The direct engagement process, you'll have people working on that all the time, trying to make contact and engage with different employers. And then you've got more high-level contacts, invitations, which requires senior leadership to be involved. Crucial to all of this is CRM type processes and intelligence gathering. And then collaboration activities, events, progress monitoring, all of these are key features of your strategy that need to be there. Consider the process and checklist. What are the skills required? What are the responsibilities? Structure and the engagement across teams, how to share experience and expertise. So yeah, just thinking about what's needed when. I mean, it's really important in the sort of design phase, but how your organizations operate, and it's really just making sure that it's well coordinated and appropriately sort of managed and resourced, I guess, at different levels. In terms of implementation, again, you're the experts. You know your organizational structure and outlook, personnel, your key strengths. But I guess it's really important that it's highly effective management and communication, that everyone can access the same up-to-date information. They can see the CRM type information, that it's timely, that it's not duplicated, that it's efficient, that everyone understands what's being done when, how they relate to different programs, different teams. So yeah, it's a challenge, and that's sort of the key point about implementation, making sure that these elements are ironed out at an early stage. A centralized employment engagement strategy will help with that. The fully aligned effective employer communication strategy, appropriate governance, as I've suggested, with senior leadership oversight and sort of really deep and direct involvement where necessary, and taking an account management type role, a trusted advisor to employers. That's a key point that I keep promoting and speaking to employers about, is that colleges are setting themselves up to provide this resource, and they will be able to, carry a lot of the administrative burden, make it as seamless as possible, and just be a trusted advisor, be able to give you the right information about the skills available, the level of progress of the students, their readiness, how the placement models might work, all of those sorts of things. It's really about account management, and that's the service that you're hopefully offering. You need to think about roles and professional development and training needs potentially. Some staff obviously will need to assign considerable time and effort to employer engagement in their roles. Senior management will have a different role in defining and promoting and supporting the offer with networking events, showcasing centre expertise, the calibre and quality of students, their technical skills, the centre facilities. So it's really about roles and needs analysis. Always it's about effective intelligence gathering and record keeping, leads generation, timely communications and follow-up. It's really useful just to have this offer of trial and proof of concept. So being informed, I guess, I mean, you don't have to be experts in the different industries and the different routes for T-levels, but it's just about being informed, having a quick understanding, like an understanding of what the different programs involve, irrespective of where you're working within the centre, and being open-minded, because, as I say, often you think you're speaking to a construction company, you think you know what their needs might be, and you think you're sort of playing to a certain area, and you can overlook key resource requirements. They might need no one might mention it in the conversation, but actually what they really need is some digital support. They just need some digital competencies or some business administration. So it's really about not making assumptions, and really engaging with them and having sort of constructive conversations about business needs, and keeping an open-minded about those. Because I guess the main challenge is about Reviewing, anticipating the relationship between demand and supply for industry placements and for specific T-levels and the full range of students that you will need to place, and the wider benefits of T-levels. So it's coordinating this demand, these opportunities, and the supply and the availability. In terms of that, there are some, as I said, there's excellent resources available. There's two case studies that are useful to consider in light about implementation and sort of efficient operation. There's Grimsby College, which has the Career Confidence Collaboration, and that's where they've chosen to collaborate with other colleges to create a shared database for employers. So they've got a particularly targeted at providing a consistent offer to the NHS. So they're making sure that all contacts are planned and placements are shared fairly, and then they're not duplicating effort, they're not hassling employers, they're not overburdening anyone. It's a much more coordinated, professional, efficient, and highly effective offer. It seems much more professional. It's much, just able to produce much better results. And it goes back to that point about this being a service and how valuable that can be. Chichester College has got a good case study about recognizing the sort of the pervasive sort of impact of T-levels and the changes across their organization and across their consortium, and the changes to the curriculum offer generally, not just sort of for placement officers or employment engagement staff, but for admissions, exams, curriculum, practitioners, all sorts. So they've taken a whole organization approach, which I think is really important. They've communicated this to all staff to reinforce opportunities and expectations and show that everyone is sort of responsible and how they're responsible for contributing and maximizing opportunities. They've brought on a new CRM system, which is used widely. So they've got very consistent messaging. It ensures that T-levels and industry placements are higher on senior leadership agenda. There's really deep involvement there. And it's all working to maximize opportunities. So, they're just key points I think you need to consider. And again, monitoring quality and performance and outcomes. It again goes back to that point about sort of short-termism or sustainable relationships and a service. We need these employers to understand the benefits and appreciate the value of this next year as well, and the year after that. And these volumes are increasing, and if it's an effective service and it's meeting these business needs, it will continue to sort of build on itself, won't it? So that's really important. And so I guess in that sense, always return to the benefits and the value of T-levels and industry placements, and reinforce these, many of which I've already mentioned in terms of this technical support, resourcing service, longer term, no obligation, highly cost-effective selection and recruitment service, talent development program, solution to contemporary skills shortages. It's a corporate social responsibility and business promotional opportunities. There's diversity and inclusion tool. I had an example a while ago where a very established company thought that it didn't need T-levels because it had a very effective apprenticeship programs. And it said, well, I don't see how that is necessarily, we need it in the short term because we've got these apprenticeships, they meet those requirements. But it was only once we had discussions about how they might use it as a diversity type tool, because it was an engineering type sector. And they realized that they could use this to increase representation of females within the organization, or less privileged backgrounds and things like that. So there's all sorts of avenues which these can really offer, which they would have found very difficult to do through normal recruitment or sort of entry-level sort of talent development type programs. In terms of relationships, I think I've sort of mentioned several times already the importance of making sure that it is about sustainable employer relationships. It's about, from my experience, it's crucially about sort of promoting and presenting this high quality resourcing service and these two different options, shorter term and longer term. It's crucial to sound informed and to focus on relationship building rather than sort of hard-nosed sales focus. It's about intelligence gathering appreciating the wider benefits of technical education, training, and employment partnership. And I don't think you need to be an expert in these fields. You just need to be informed. You just need to be aware of what the company structure is, to ask about where their different sites are located, about their projects, and to understand what the different options in T-levels and what sort of skills candidates will have at different points. Like, working with colleagues, that shouldn't be difficult to sort of start to gain that sort of just broadly informed, knowledgeable, open-minded perspective. Think about company profiles in advance, and sort of mapping and modeling coverage around your centers. It doesn't take much research and investigation, just to sort of review the company, review the T-level program structure and content, understand likely synergies, areas of interest, potential alignment between business needs and these technical skills that can be applied. As I said, don't make assumptions. Consider different types of employers. Large companies, they'll have designated teams working on this. So it's about making that contact directly. They work full time on it, so you can make really, really good relationships with that. I've been speaking to quite a number of these sorts of teams, and they're really, really keen to get to understand how they can maximize this, how it can work for them. And so it's really important to identify those people, to gain those. And then at the same time, for smaller companies where they don't have that type of designated resource, you could start to fulfill that function. So there's different ways to approach these elements. You can fulfill this role if large companies struggle with a lot of this recruitment, technical support, skill shortages. Then if you can do some of that for small companies, it's really, really valuable to them, invaluable to them. So yeah, just think about who you're speaking to. In terms of effective targeting and timing, and avoiding inefficiencies, duplicating and hassling. It's about, center collaborations. I find that, there are many ways to open up opportunities, stimulate interest and tempt employers, using sort of a relaxed, no commitment approach, explaining the value and the benefits, confirming opportunities available as this no commitment offer of a high value service, offer an initial proof of concept, fully supported trial, 1 to 2 placements, ask them to identify a team which is under pressure, which would value some extra resource, would benefit from technical support. It's about communicating the simplicity of the service, which would be resourced and managed and supported by you, by the centre largely. The obligations on the part of the employer are important, but they're not particularly burdensome. Just ask them to produce a simple job description, the technical support required, the key skills and duties, teams and roles in bullets, and just tell them you'll support the planning and preparations and remove any administrative burden. You can immediately start to source and select candidates once your T-levels in the areas are underway. I mean, you have to be realistic and pragmatic, and you do talk to them about the sort of the availability of students, when they'll be ready, how far improved. But because T-levels have been operating in waves, and wave 4, there are often opportunities to consider, certainly if you're collaborating with others, programs that have already be well established, as well as those that you might need to give some time for getting the placement fully in place. So yeah, focusing on relationships and the breadth of opportunities and benefits associated with T-levels. It's not just about sort of, it's not about hard-nosed sales. It's not about uncomfortable or cold calls. It's really about having these, open and constructive conversations. Just quickly in terms of relationships and things, I mean, to cite 2 common objectives that sort of come up in different forms. There's often technical or administrative concerns there, but I mean, they're usually inaccurate anxieties or too easy assumptions or excuses from employers. They sort of think, well, this could be a burden. From my experience, there's very few technical obstacles which wouldn't apply to any new recruit. The employer obligations are limited and they're fully supported to meet them. So it's usually quite easy to address those and reassure employers in that sense. Another very common objection, but also hopefully relatively easy to answer, is about the inexperience or the inappropriateness of candidates, students' age, maturity, experience. Firstly, these are advanced level students. Secondly, they are the T-levels designed to get them ready. Your first-year programs are presumably all about getting the candidates fully understanding all of the health and safety requirements, understanding professional responsibilities and behaviours. But a key point, I think, is that in most of these contexts, we operate in team-based and collaborative methods, don't we? So each team member will have a different role. They'll have a different skill set. They'll have different aptitudes and experience. So not everyone has to be the team member using the dangerous equipment or drilling holes in the aircraft fuselage. It's a technical support role. And there's going to be places where within a team, they'll be really valuable. So yeah, always present the offer positively, find those opportunities. So I think I'll just try to speed up slightly. So there are, I mean, undoubtedly challenges and issues, and it does have to be thought about realistically. Volumes, availability, interest, opportunities, sort of coordinate all of these elements. Management and resourcing, coordination and communication. Quality, making sure that the quality is there and any issues are addressed quickly and readily. And customer satisfaction. I mean, like I said earlier, you need to be able to place students, you need to be able to build these partnerships, but you need to be able to sustain them, and you need these kind of employers wanting more of these students in following years. You need them to come back next year. So I did have a slide here, at this point, based on what I've outlined, just suggesting if there are any questions or comments, interviews about key challenges, any options or solutions, your current levels of skills, expertise, and experience that would be relevant, any professional development and support needs. I don't know whether it's worth seeing if there are any questions or comments at this point, or I can conclude and we can find time for that.
Well, there was one question that's in the chat from Antoinette. She asked, I thought at one time there was discussion of the NES helping out finding placements on the National Apprenticeship Database Scheme. What happened to this? You know, some big employers were behind T-levels, but what are their schemes for onboarding? If you can just address that briefly.
It was, I don't know why, but I found it difficult to capture parts of those. I understand so they're wondering what happened to the particular apprenticeship service support, which I think has sort of just transformed into supporting from other partnership organizations. But sorry, I didn't capture exactly.
The question was just asking that there were several big employers behind T-levels, and what happened to the scheme for onboarding, you know, helping to get students onto placements?
Okay. Well, there certainly are lots of schemes available at the moment. I mean, I can look at the sort of wording of that and get back on the specifics of that particular program for onboarding. But I mean, like I say, I work for the SDN, and there's a whole team of people there who work with the relevant team at the Department for Education on employer support, this employer support program, and that should really be able to facilitate and provide all sorts of one-to-one support, wider support, introductions. So I don't know whether that's maybe superseded the specific program, but I can certainly get back to the delegate and with like a more specific and targeted response. But there is certainly a lot of support in all sorts of forms to fill those sorts of functions, and centres, should definitely access those.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll pass that message on to you. Thank you for that. There's really interesting.
Sorry, Tony. Paul, I just wanted Antoinette from BMET College in Birmingham. It'd be really helpful for hubs across nationally to know which employers are open and receptive to T-levels. Otherwise, what you get is excessive duplication of work up and down the country. I've noticed Jason's coming with a great comment about our hubs like Grimsby set up internally, or is it a national idea? For this to work, and especially when it starts scaling up, when they start removing the funding, we need to know which of these big employers that were behind T-levels that said they're an essential are actually up for onboarding. How many? How do we get hold of them? and that would need to be done by region, because otherwise we are more than used to doing work experience as colleges, but they're with very small employers, and that's not the quality of placement that is demanded by a T-level. Far, far from it. So it's trying to find, you know, a centralised approach to, instead of us all being very, very inefficient about this, finding who the big employers out there that stamp their colours to the mast, like Rolls-Royce, right, like Fujitsu. Okay, who do we talk to? How many places have you got? When can we send our students? That would really, really help us, Paul, especially when you start to scale up now. So colleges like my college, who currently don't run T-levels, are going to enter the forum in 12 months' time. So you've got more and more colleges onboarding. When you remove the funding, there's even more students onboarding. So we need a central approach to this. And that's why at the moment, it's a real challenge. Thank you, Dulce, for saying, well said, Antoinette. But they're the challenges. And saying about for the FE sector, these are the massive, massive challenges.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Antoinette. I think that it's all of the things that I've sort of outlined in my presentation. I think that you're absolutely right. That does apply at the national level, doesn't it? That coordination, the lack of duplication, making it more efficient, centralized understanding. If we could have sort of classifications and database of particular employers and classifications about, well, information about who the right people to contact are, classifications about their receptiveness, sort of their experience with this, that would be really, really valuable. So I'll explore and try to identify if there's anything along those lines that is being developed and used. I mean, there are certainly collaborations, but a more centralized and national level, and certainly explore about trying to ensure that one is sort of that we can instigate that type of thing, because I think, yeah, it's really valuable to have the type of coordination I've been talking about within centres. Much more, it's really important that that's done nationally for that efficiency and that coordination. Absolutely.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for that. That was a really great question. Thank you, Antoinette. So we'll follow that up with Paul. If I can now, I will turn to Elaine from the Yeovil District Hospital to give an employer's perspective of what they're looking for. Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you, Tony. Hello, everybody. My name is Elaine. Can you hear me okay? Because I'm in someone else's office. So I'm just very conscious that it might be quite quiet or quite echoey.
No, we can hear you. We can hear you fine. Thanks, Elaine.
Yeah.
Fabulous, thank you. My name's Elaine Cox and I work at Yeovil Hospital in Somerset. We're one of 2 acute trusts within the county. My role is career and work experience coordinator, and I'm a newly qualified level 6 career guidance advisor as well, which helps me tremendously within my role. In terms of my main responsibilities, I have worked and have continued to work very closely with our Yeovil College, which is literally 5 minutes across the road, which is fantastic. And we've been linking with them for a number of years on our various work experience programs. And when we knew that the T-levels were going to be coming in, we then started to work with Yeovil College to pilot industry placements for the BTEC health students. So we wanted to get ourselves prepared so that when the T-levels were implemented proper, we had an idea of what sort of placements would work for us and how we could go about coordinating them. And we did that from 2018. We started to pilot that with Yeovil College. We've opened it out to T-level students. We still have BTECs as well going through, but business, health, catering and hospitality, and also information technology as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of our aims as an employer, we wanted to try to strengthen what we can offer to local students, because obviously it's important for us that we're training our own workforce, but that we're utilising talent and skill within the local community and promoting the development of that talent within the local community, as well as encouraging people to come in from outside of Somerset. So what we wanted was to try to provide some sort of pathway where the T-levels would fit prior to going to further education or into employment. So we started off by looking at our work experience programme and how that fitted. The pilot that we did with Yeovil College, we extended a 1-week work experience programme non-clinically through to 1 week clinically. And then for the second year of the T-levels or the BTECs, we then brought the students in for 1 or 2 days per week from around about November, December time all the way through until they finish their hours, which tends to be around about May or June time. So we found that the programmes that we have actually link in quite nicely, and they set our areas of the hospital up as well for welcoming these students, because they were already used to having students on placement. And this pilot enabled us then to explore what we could do further within the hospital and outside of the acute setting, which I'll touch upon in a little while. Could I have the next slide, please? So obviously, as an acute trust, we work very closely with our integrated care service, and we also work closely with other organisations within Somerset, and we want our programme to contribute to the wider Somerset nursing vision in particular, because we were focusing on health T-levels. So we wanted to try to provide an opportunity for us to grow our own staff as well. So nurse training many years ago, you would apply for a trainee nurse position at your local hospital and you would go through. Obviously, with it being degree orientated, that changed that very slightly. But with all of the different avenues for entry into nursing now, T-levels are now providing us with that option to actually train our own staff and get staff used to mentoring students, and also making the hospital environment slightly less overwhelming for those that might want to come back to us as medical students perhaps, or as nursing students or midwifery students when they enter university. They don't look quite so much like rabbits caught in headlights if they've actually done a prolonged placement with us. We also hope that it's a mentoring opportunity for our non-registered members of staff, because our registered members of staff are being asked to mentor students on placement anyway. So it's a development opportunity for the non-registered colleagues as well. Next, please. So in terms of the benefit to us as an employer, apart from developing our own workforce, we have been able to develop the T-level placements to fill gaps in our workforce. So following COVID, we were seeking a lot of different healthcare assistant roles in areas of the hospital, and because the T-level students had already been on placement with us for a little while, we utilised the skills that they had developed and the confidence, and we then started to offer them placements on the bank, which enabled them to gain employment initially as well. So they could do their normal placement hours, they could also do their paid placements as well, which would give them more exposure to that ward environment and help them to build that confidence. In terms of support for those students, we use our healthcare assistants, we use our maternity support workers, and as I touched upon earlier, it's a fantastic development opportunity for them, one that they don't usually have. And what we're looking at is some sort of mentorship program specifically for them, so that they have the skills to actually support these students in placement, and they don't feel like they are letting those students down by not supporting them or mentoring them as they believe they should. In terms of the learner, the benefit to the learner, we have found that by offering them the opportunity to do paid placements, they can earn whilst they're learning as well. It tends to be paid placements maybe 2 or 3 months after they've already started doing a placement. So we're not throwing them straight in. Sometimes the students won't be coming to us until year 2 anyway. So in year 1, they would have had exposure in different ways by work experience or short placements. We've also got the luxury of our one of our practice assessors and practice educators within the hospital actually being employed part-time by the college as the T-level tutor. So that helps tremendously, because actually they can also provide supervision and shadowing opportunity alongside those learners for those that might feel a little bit less comfortable initially within the live environment. We try to make sure that the student is part of the ward team, and you'll see that from the resources that we provide. In terms of the age of our learners, they're coming through from college, but we don't restrict them to having to be 18 in order to go into placement, because we're a trust that already appoints young people at the age of 16 plus into different apprenticeships. So we don't see them as being under 18 as a barrier at all. In actual fact, you know, the maturity level and the confidence level of students varies so much that the age is really just a number. As long as we've got the risk assessments in place and we've got the support mechanisms in place for them, there is no reason why we can't accept a student who is 16 going on 17 at college, or 17 going on 18. What we have found as a challenge to getting placements is the staff potentially thinking that it's going to be an extra resource that they're going to have to look after, they're going to have to baby the students and take it away from their normal day-to-day. And in actual fact, to some extent, we have got to make sure that the students are supervised, but actually we don't want to impose on those professionals within that area any more than is necessary. And the reason we put the students on placement with them 2 or 3 months after they've already started their second year, or after they've done practice in the college, is because we believe with the college that they are already up to scratch. One of the things that I quite enjoy talking to staff members about who are quite resistant to supporting a learner on practice is almost to throw the experience back at them. So by that I mean, if I've got somebody who is a bit reluctant to support a learner, they don't really see the benefit, they're too stressed, they're too under pressure, actually what would they have found useful if they had first been looking at the career choice that they were wanting to go into? And I've had several members of staff say, actually, it would have been really helpful for me before I went into nursing or before I went into a care setting to understand what that environment was like, and whether it was actually going to be the right environment for me. Could I have the next slide, please? So in terms of the resources, obviously we try to provide placements in each of our ward areas, and we provide supervision by the college tutor who comes over and works alongside the students when needed. We also have a team of practice educators who support all students on placement. So nursing students, newly appointed healthcare assistant students who are doing their care certificate with us, trainee nurse associates. Those members of staff are being picked up by practice educators within the academy. So I've been able to throw my industry placement students into that group as well to make sure that they get looked after. And when my colleagues who are clinical do a ward round to check on their students, they also pick up mine as well to make sure that they're okay. To enable the student to feel part of our team, we make sure that they have a hospital photo ID badge, which they will wear alongside their college one. They also have a uniform that the college provide them with, but it's based on a healthcare assistant uniform, but it does identify them very clearly as a trainee healthcare assistant or an industry placement student on in the environment rather than a qualified healthcare assistant. We also put them onto trust induction, as we would do with every other new member of staff. The college in return provides the DBS checks for those learners. They do all of the preparation, they provide the care certificate, and they liaise with us really closely regarding assessments as well, so that we can participate quite actively in the development of that student in terms of their learning objectives. We provide them with the job description before they actually apply for placement, and we go along to visit the college, myself and one of my practice educator colleagues, because we think it's really important, particularly the learners that are coming in from the health T level, to have a really realistic expectation of what the ward environment is going to be like for them. We don't tend to put as much effort into pre-meeting for those students that are coming into a single department such as IT or catering, although the managers within those specific departments will meet the students in advance anyway once I've organised the placement with them. But for the health ones, because students may be motivated to go into a health career by something that they've watched on the telly, or by a family member being in a health profession, But that doesn't necessarily mean that they've taken the time to actually find out the training that their family member had to go through in order to be qualified, and the daily challenges that they're going through, and what the ward, you know, the ward has various different sounds, smells, the atmosphere can feel very overwhelming. So we try to give the student an idea of what they can expect. We also want them to be on a shift pattern from the very start. So they do their trust induction, which is normally a day or two within the trust. They do some bespoke training. So they might do baseline observations, which is taking temperatures, blood pressures, things like that. We also get them talking to our dementia care specialists sometimes, because we have patients with dementia on different wards, and we want the students to feel comfortable corresponding and communicating with them in the right way, so that they know that they are interacting with that patient in the right way. But the shift pattern enables them to see how that work environment is going to work, because once they apply for work, it's not a 9-to-5 office-based job. It is going to be potentially 7 in the morning start or 8 o'clock in the evening finish. We don't have them working night shifts, and we don't have them working weekends. If they decide to join the bank for a healthcare assistant and be paid, then it's up to them which hours they work, because then they become an employee as well along the side. But in terms of their placement, we don't have them working nights and weekends. We also ask them not to come onto placement unless they opt to during the course holiday periods, but quite often they will opt to do extra hours, because by then they feel part of the team and they actually want to help. Could I have the next slide, please? So in terms of employer engagement, it's really difficult, because we are an employer that is already engaging with our local college. So for me to sit here and talk about the placements, it's because we've already got that working relationship in place with the college. However, from other interaction that I have with different schools around the area, I do know how challenging it can be to try and get an employer within the NHS particularly to understand the benefit of a T-level or any kind of industry placement, in actual fact, because we're still running industry placement for BTECs alongside the T-levels. So actually I'm starting to refer a lot more to my college students as college students rather than differentiating them, because sometimes placement areas, particularly out in the community for health, so GP practices, can find it very confusing to understand the difference between a T-level or a BTEC or a student nurse from placement on university. So actually we tend to focus on the fact that they are learning to go into that role. We do take part a lot in careers events. So I do encourage schools and colleges to utilise the platforms that might have databases of different professionals in different sectors, including the NHS, who have volunteered to become health ambassadors. So speakers for schools, Inspiring the Future, Step into the NHS, they all have resources, I understand, where you can find different lesson plans, different materials that you can use within lessons to try and raise the understanding of the wealth of NHS careers, and particularly the different entry routes, including a T-level. And from my perspective, when I'm looking at a student's application or when I'm talking to the college, I have a personal assumption, which sometimes does get challenged, but that if a student is already at college, they have conducted, however small, an amount of research into the role that they want to go into, or at least they know the difference between a nurse and a midwife, in terms of if they want to work with children, they don't want to be a midwife because they don't deal with children, they deal with the mum. So I would expect a certain amount of research having been undertaken by that student, however basic, just going online and having a look at the Health Careers website, undertaking a careers online quiz, which I've done myself, and thankfully it came up with some roles that were very similar and certainly along the lines of the one that I'm already doing. It didn't encourage me to retrain as a nurse or a doctor, so I was quite relieved about that. but those quizzes are always really good. And I have built up a database of members of staff that I work with here and around Somerset that sign up to take part in online careers events, face-to-face career learning, online webinars, career fairs and things like that. So to try and get engagement from employers, it could be that in the first instance, you take baby steps to get them engaged with you, get them meeting the learners, understanding what you're teaching and what those learners need out of an employer. Because I'm a qualified career advisor, I'm also an enterprise advisor for a couple of our schools. I enrolled in that scheme because I knew it would be helpful for me, but it's also given me a really good understanding of what the schools and colleges are having to achieve in terms of targets like Gatsby benchmarks. So I know that as an employer, we have a social responsibility to contribute to our academic partner achievements of the Gatsby benchmarks, and I know that without us they wouldn't be able to do that very easily. So it's definitely a partnership, but from an employer, I don't have a complete understanding of the challenge that comes from trying to get employer engagement, because I'm already engaging. So I'm very lucky that I've got colleagues that are already engaging. Could I have the final slide, please? Next slide. So this is just for information, really, probably aimed more so at healthcare colleagues who are a little bit reluctant to take industry placement students. But we have seen a marked difference in those students coming to us through work experience and then progressing through to industry placement and then progressing through to their career choice, whether that is going into higher education and then returning to us as a student nurse. We recently celebrated a newly qualified podiatrist, sorry, not paediatrician, a newly qualified podiatrist who actually did a non-clinical work experience week with us many years ago when she was doing pre-A-level. When she went on to A-levels, she did our 1 week healthcare experience programme. She then went to university, did her degree, and now she's come back as a fully qualified podiatrist. So we do have it, just our basic work experience. We're finding now that with the addition of T-level and industry placements, that career pathway is much more detailed before they get to the university stage. And that's really the key thing for us. The other thing that I always try to say to the learners and to the placements is, if a learner decides that the placement is not for them, that's not a failure of the placement area. It's actually given that student the courage to identify what is and isn't for them. So what may have motivated them initially, in reality, it can be very different. So we have had a learner who wanted to be a paediatric nurse. They had a placement on the paediatric ward. Actually, what they realised was that they wanted to be a nursery nurse rather than a paediatric nurse. And being on a paediatric ward with very sick children is actually very different. And I think they found that within 2 or 3 weeks, but that's the beauty of the industry placement. Not all learners will return to the organisation, that's absolutely fine. But if we can employ them and give them that really good grounding, at some point we hope they will join the NHS somewhere. Even if it's not in Yeovil or in Somerset, it will be an NHS organisation somewhere, whether it's an acute hospital or whether it's in a community setting somewhere. So the NHS is the umbrella organisation, and in some way we're helping to develop the wider NHS workforce. Equally, we have ended placements early where we felt that the placement wasn't right for the learner. Before they start, we do stress the importance of professionalism, which obviously includes them alerting their placement area if they're unwell, or if they are going to be late due to other things outside of work that are impacting upon their ability to complete their scheduled hours. And after a while, after a few reviews with students and a few assessments with the college and discussions, we have on occasion ended that placement because we just felt that it wasn't right for that learner. it was perhaps too difficult for them to complete in the way that would be beneficial for them. And sometimes we recognise where the placement isn't right for that learner, even if they don't have the courage to alert us to it themselves, fearing that they're going to be failing. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we've been piloting these placements for a few years. COVID did get in the way of that, but we managed to bounce back. We have learnt to set the college and the students' expectations of what they can step into or what they will be stepping into. We work very closely with the college. We understand that the college has a better understanding of those individuals' personalities and their characteristics and their strengths and their aspirations. So we very much trust the college to identify the best students for placement. Having said that, we do then meet the students and give the placement areas an opportunity to meet those students before they come in. As I mentioned, we provide some bespoke training for them and we make sure they're up to speed. I think the important thing for us that we've learned is to make sure that we're not terrifying our ward areas or our staff in terms of the additional resources. It's not an additional drain on resources, it's an additional member of the team to help with tasks and to learn as they're going to be eventually a fully fledged employed member of that team. So final slide, please. As I mentioned, we believe that there's success in every placement, even if it finishes early or the student decides to withdraw. Quite often we have had occasion where we've wanted to swap a student around. So we do quite often have applications from students that want to go into midwifery or nursing and they're not entirely sure which. So where possible, we will try to swap places after a few months so that each student gets an idea of their placement area. This year we had a student who wanted to experience portering within the hospital and they actually requested to do a block week within portering and actually wanted to apply for the bank portering position rather than nursing because actually they felt that met their strengths and what they were looking for from their first employed role much better than the healthcare assistant one. So again, that was a success in placement because it enabled them to see that different area. We utilise healthcare assistants, maternity support workers, rather than registered members of staff who are already looking after university students in placement. But we believe that it provides a really good opportunity for the learner, the college, us as an organisation, and also the staff that we've got working here with us. Recently we had a conversation with a couple of GP practices in Somerset and they have now agreed to take T-level industry placements as well. So I've now secured 6 placements within primary care within Somerset and they use the words marvellous and wonderful and I was pretty much bouncing up and down on my seat. So that was a huge achievement for this week. So we're just excited about those coming on board as well. Thank you. I don't think I can add anything else.
Thank you very much, Elaine. I'm just going to turn to Richard. Is there one question, because we've got 2 more speakers yet, but is there one question perhaps worth putting to Elaine at this point? We can respond to the others via email.
Yes, there was a question regarding whether we would find someone with a similar job to yourself, you know, like a career or work experience role at most hospitals or trusts, or is your role unique?
I would love to say that I'm unique. I'm not. Well, I think I probably am. My husband would say that I am, but my role is definitely not. So a lot of trusts have got work experience coordinators. I know other organisations in the NHS have work experience or placement coordinators. Careers, for me, I did want to make it very distinct from my role because I wanted to go into the career guidance element of it as well, not only for young people coming into the NHS, but also for my colleagues as well, having gone through a period of needing a job change and not really knowing how to go about it and where my skills would fit. I had some job coaching myself, so that's why I wanted to go into it. So that part of my role, I am the only level 6 qualified within our organisation, but I'm not the only person that does careers and work experience. And I think the role is probably found in most hospitals, maybe just different job titles. So it could be placement coordinator, placement administrator, work experience, career development. It can vary, but definitely work experience is a big area.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Elaine.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Elaine. That was very interesting. Thank you, Elaine. Can we now turn, please, to Georgia from Notre Dame Catholic Sixth Form College?
Anyway, I'll start. Hello, everybody. So I'm Georgia. I am the Employer Engagement Lead at Notre Dame Sixth Form College in Leeds. And initially, I thought I would talk you through our structure within college. Since we've implemented T-levels 3 years ago, the structure of our staffing has had to change dramatically. One of which was my roles. My role never existed before T-levels came along. And there was a real gap in the college for someone who could reach out to employers, had those connections, and could source placements. So my role is entirely based around doing that. I work with T-level students. We've got sort of a range of different courses at the minute, but I work to source the placements, develop the students' employability skills. So I'm the lead contact with employers, but I'm also the bridge between students, parents, and the placement, because I'm sure you can understand things can get sort of misunderstood. We don't want parents not being in the loop about the students' placements. So it's my role there to make sure that everyone understands what's expected and what students will be doing. We now also have a new role of an achievement tutor. So these are very similar to a normal sort of form tutor. However, they deal with all the pastoral side of things, whether they be in college or on placement. Their achievement tutor is the person who will go out and do the 3 checks of well-being while the students are on placement, as well as checking that they are doing okay sort of mentally and that they're ready for their placement. Obviously, some of these students have never worked in the past, so we want to make sure that they're fully prepared. I work very closely with the achievement tutors. Often, if any parents have any worries about their sort of son or daughter going out on placement, we'll have meetings with parents and students just to make sure that they're comfortable. Now, this structure has taken some time to get sort of a final result. We did have many different roles over the past 3 years. At the moment, this seems to be what's working. We all communicate and the student knows who they need to go to for each area of their sort of course. So they'll come to me for placement, achievement tutor for pastoral, and curriculum staff for obviously curriculum. Can I have the next slide, please? So obviously I was brought into this role. I had no background in education. I am a recruiter through and through, really. So the college found that they needed someone to make that contact with employers and sort of get in the door. So over the past sort of year and a half, these are things that have been working best for me. Initially, research is the key thing. Now, I found that although a lot of companies don't know much about T-levels and they've not been highly publicised, there are companies out there that are already working with young students, and offer apprenticeships or work experience. These are the employers that are our warm contacts. They're already interested in providing support for young people. So I found that they are the people that I'm targeting first because they're already interested. And following on from that, the next thing that I would do is always pick up the phone. Emails can be lost. If you pick up the phone, that means that the employers has to speak to you, or they know your name straight away. Now, you can't always get through to the person that you want to speak to, or the head of HR, or your director of the company. But if you keep ringing, your name will get mentioned, and then the company is aware of who you are. If you can't get through on the phone, I tend to send an email that isn't really giving too much away, introducing myself, grabbing a bit of attention from the employer, introducing what they could do and sort of the benefits, but I want them to want more. it does sound a little bit salesy, but I want them to be able to reach out to me and ask to find out more, and they're intrigued. Once I've got that warm bite from the employer, I will always set up either a face-to-face meeting or a video call. This is a bit more personable. You can get a touch of sort of what the employer's feeling, how they've been involved with students in the past, etc. It just seems to work better. They seem to create a relationship with you. Once they've got that relationship, they sort of want to create a stronger relationship with the college, which hopefully will then lead to strong placements. I'll also say that from my experience, if an employer isn't interested initially, they're probably not going to be the best employer for our students. And here at Notre Dame, our students are the centre of everything. So we want the students to get the best placement. I know previously there has been the incentive fund for employers, which has sometimes got employers thinking, oh, well, yes, we'll get the incentive fund. It doesn't matter what type of placement we offer. These are the placements that you need. If an employer isn't interested from the offset, they're probably not going to be interested 8 weeks down the line in a placement. So you don't need to push them. You need to value the employers that are keen. If an employer is maybe a bit cold with you to start with, in a year's time, they may come back. There's no need to sort of push it on them. They may just need time to think about it. One thing that we have done at Notre Dame is have employer breakfast meetings where we've invited about 10 to 15 employers over different days, having breakfast with the curriculum staff, the achievement tutors, myself. It gives the employers a chance to speak to us openly and in sort of a relaxed setting about T-levels. It gets them to get a bit of an understanding about the college, the concept behind T-levels, what a placement will involve. But there's no formality, so they can ask anything, even if it sounds like a silly question, because it's just over breakfast. It tends to go down really well. Following on from the breakfast meetings, we tend to set up sessions with the students as well. So the employers, before any placement is confirmed, they can sit with the students and ask questions. The students can ask the employers questions and learn a little bit about what the employers do and the companies they do. And it just seems to build that bridge again between the students and the employers. It makes it not as daunting for the students as well, because like I said, a lot of them haven't had a part-time job before. Meeting the employer can be quite daunting, but in a relaxed setting in the classroom, they can just sort of chat about what they do on the course and what the employers do. We tend to do it in something similar to sort of a speed dating format, where we'll bring 10 employers in. We'll have a group of students. They'll be in groups of 2 or 3, and the employers will just rotate round, and each group will have sort of 10 minutes to discuss. It just opens up that interaction, and then the employers can also see the standard of work that the students can do and the knowledge of the students. Can I have the next slide, please? Moving on to sort of once we've established the relationship with the employers and they're happy to take a placement, placement allocations may seem like the simplest part of the placement, but they are quite difficult. This is a process that we've worked on that's still evolving, and we do have to do it very different for all of our different courses. For digital, for example, once a student is sort of ready for the placement, we will get confirmation from the employer that they're happy to host. All contracts will be signed. The employer will then provide us with a job description. Now, we found this is crucial because although there's different types of companies and we have an understanding of what the companies do, I know, for example, for digital, I'm not always fully aware what a software developer in one company will do compared to a software developer in another company. So it is crucial to get that job description of what they'll be expecting of the student, types of tasks they'll be doing. Following on from this, we will then have the students working in the background on their CVs and what they're interested in. We do a careers form where they fill out sort of the type of companies they're interested in, where they think the strengths are, areas of the course that they struggle with. So this gives us a bit of an overview of what the student will be good at and the type of placement that they will fit. We will then work together with curriculum staff and achievement tutors to allocate student placements. This is sort of quite a wide range. They won't just give them one placement because it is competitive. As I'm sure you'll know, there's not many employers that are sort of jumping at our feet to get placements. So it is competitive. The high-end placements, we do have a fair few students interviewing for. And that is the process. It's like a normal job interview. The students will go, they'll have an interview with their line manager. After each interview, they will receive feedback, and then they will be informed if they've got that placement or not. If the student has sort of not got that placement, we will then work on finding them another placement that potentially suits their needs more or will be more interest to them. But we do ensure no matter whether they get the placement initially or not, they always receive feedback. And this is always monitored, tracked, so the student knows that they've got areas for development. Once the placement is confirmed per student, we will then send out all the contracts. We will complete a risk assessment. We will, if the student has any additional needs, we will sit down with the employer and the student to go over what support the employer can provide. So that's the process that we tend to use for sort of the digital and the business T-level course. For healthcare, we found it a little bit more difficult because obviously the NHS is under so much pressure. We had to look at as a citywide approach. We didn't want it to be sort of myself from Notre Dame bombarding all the local hospitals, and then perhaps Leeds City College, which is 10 minutes down the road, also bombarding the hospitals. So we collaborated with the Healthcare Academy. So we work under one umbrella, and with this, it means that there's no competitiveness between the colleges, there's no sort of fighting for placements. The Healthcare Academy works with all the sort of NHS providers and the council, everything like that in the local area. And we work together to source enough placements for all of our students. It's a very similar process of we work contacting employers, getting them to agree to placements, but we then host a parents' evening where we get the different employers to speak to both parents and students about the different sort of careers you can do within the healthcare setting. A lot of our students weren't aware of different directions that they could go in. So this was crucial because when they came to applying for their placements, we needed them to understand whether they wanted to work in the community, within a hospital, within sort of one of the council hubs. So we made sure that we did this early on in their first year, even though they won't be going out on their placement until second year. Once they had that parents' evening, we then wanted the students to select 3 placements out of sort of the different areas that we had the placements with the employers, and they had to write an expression of interest. So they had to cover why they wanted this placement, why they think they'd be good at it, their strengths, what interests them, what their future career ambitions are. This was then sent to the employers, and we had an assessment day. So once again, collaboratively with Leeds City College and all the local hospitals, council and the Healthcare Academy, we met at a neutral venue, and we put on a day where the students met all together. They completed tasks to build teamwork and stuff like that. They also had speakers from the different departments who spoke about their experiences and the things that they do daily. And at the end of that day, the employers reviewed all the expression of interest forms, and we sat down as a team to allocate placements so that who we think would suit certain surroundings, what we thought was best. This means that sort of over the full 2 years, we have been working collaboratively with the local colleges, but it's made it a smoother process for the employers because they've not had to deal with loads of different contacts. They've just had 2 main contacts, myself and the lead at Leeds City College, but it seems to have worked pretty well. Our students in health are looking to go on their placement. They've just started it in their second year, and they'll be doing 1 day every week. Sorry, 2 days every week for the foreseeable. And any contact that the employers have, they just know that they have these 2 contacts, myself and the Leeds City College, but it is all under the healthcare umbrella. Can I have the next slide, please? So one of the key things that we have also found at Notre Dame is the students potentially don't have the soft skills that we presume that they will have. So as I'm sure you're aware, that 35 hours can be used to develop the students' employability skills, and these hours can be classed towards the placement hours. So we make sure that every week the students who are on a T-level course have one extra tutorial that is led by their achievement tutor that covers developing soft skills, anything you can think of that you'd come into contact with while at work, whether it be workwear, how to apply for apprenticeships, etc. We try and make them as interesting as possible and as not like being in college. We like to, when we go in, when they come in the classroom, they have to treat it like they're in an office, and they have to dress smart for the sessions. We want to make them as prepared as possible. A couple of things that we found is bringing in external speakers seems to work better. The students are used to the curriculum staff and their achievement tutors delivering content to them daily. So I tend to bring in a lot of employers that are keen to help students. For example, Morrison's, they do a CV workshop, and I think they do that around sort of the UK. We do mock interviews ahead of the placement interviews, where I bring in sort of 6 or 7 recruiters and they all interview the students and they get feedback, and then we do it again later in the year and the students can see how they've developed. We also do sessions with the Army. Now, it may sound a little bit silly, but the Army have the best team building activities. So whether it's a digital student or an education and childcare student, they all do a teamwork activity with the Army to get that morale, to get that team building and to get the communication. But all of these, there is so many employers out there that are keen to help. Potentially they may not be able to host a student on placement, but they're more than willing to sort of come in for an hour here and there to put on a session. And that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Georgia. That was really very interesting, very informative. We are very rapidly running out of time. So what we're going to propose is that in the evaluation, we are going to put the in the chat, we're going to put the evaluation, and we know you can multitask. So while you're doing that, we're going to ask Peter, our AOC industry lead, to give us 5 top tips just to bring this to a close. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Peter Baker. I'm the Senior Relationship Manager with the Industry Placement Support Team. So I'm going to share some tips with you, really, from some really good practice that's been taking place from the support we've been providing with Wave 1 and Wave 2 providers so far. We've only just started work with Wave 3. If you could bring the slide up for me, Tony. That's it. Forgive me if this is teaching some of you to suck eggs, but I thought it was well worth mentioning. It's kind of really thinking about how we can use social media to our advantage, and LinkedIn is definitely a very, very good way, if you're not already utilising that as a provision to engage with providers, identify who key contacts are, but also use it as a bit of leverage to promote some of the work that they may be collaborating with you on. Through social media as well, because I think it works both ways in terms of raising profiles and things like that. I'm very conscious of time, and forgive me if I'm speaking really, really fast. Another really amazing piece of practice that's emerged for us recently was setting up employer boards. So I have a couple of providers that I'm working with, in particular Chichester College, that set up some employer boards. They were struggling to get placements with local employers, but thought they'd kind of reframe how they were working with employers. They got them involved in doing things like you've heard today mentioned, things like trying to engage employers to come in and maybe give a short talk, even if it's dropping into a lesson virtually for 5 minutes. It was about building that relationship over a period of time, right the way through to collaborating on kind of the curriculum design and development and activities in student readiness. What they found is that this acted as a way for employers to get to know students and learn a little bit more about T-level, actually. And I think it was so successful that, you know, they have retained all of their employers on the employer board. So definitely something worth considering. The other key thing, and it's been mentioned in several presentations already, is being very clear with employers about expectations. We've had a couple of people speak and allude to the paperwork. The NHS was one. I was on a steering group with North Lancs, and one of the things that came back from them was a concern about the volume of paperwork. So what we've been advising providers when they're doing employer engagement is to really ram home that the bulk of the weight is carried by us as the provider in terms of paperwork, and then explaining and offering support around what the minimal paperwork might be for employers to be involved in, and mainly really providing objective feedback at mid and end point, and anything else that they might want to provide for that student by way of saying thanks, you know, when they complete that placement. If you're not already doing so, colleges are an amazing resource. It's about offering some of your services out and making sure that employers are aware of who you are in the community. So we've had some really terrific examples of where providers have offered space for meetings and events run by the local employers, because I think at the end of the day, it was all about trying to get employers through the front door and breaking down any of those barriers they may have with education. And in particular, really ramming home the T-level message, because there's still some employers out there that are not familiar with the change in the education landscape that we are also familiar with. Can you give me a next slide, please, Tony? Thank you. We've had some really good examples of providers getting involved in community-based projects as well. Whether that's the 35-hour taster opportunity that we have with industry placements. But again, I think it all feeds into raising the profile of your industry placements and what they can do, not only for the employers, but also for the community. A crib sheet as well. I've spoken with many providers that their staff are not necessarily familiar with the sales process that's required here, and there's a really useful formula in terms of trying to hit targets here, which we worked out a few years back now, which is taking your target for industry placements, dividing that by 7 and timesing it by 100 will give you an idea roughly of how many calls you might need to make in order to generate the amount of placements that you need. And Georgia as well mentioned in her presentation about the need to make sure that our staffing teams are structured in such a way as to be able to accomplish and meet those targets. And often we find that the employer engagement facing teams and the curriculum teams tend to work in tandem, work very closely, because the employer engagement team may not always be the subject specialists, if you like, and able to pitch the placement benefits and features to employers. So where we can, we advocate that there's a lot of collaboration between those employer facing teams and sometimes the curriculum teams as well. Another thing, I'm sorry I'm rushing through this, but another thing I'm aware of as well is we often get asked questions around objection handling. How do we deal with objections? That is a whole session on its own, to be honest. But what I've done is I've put a link here to objection handling, which is specifically around industry placements. So there's a link there to your Padlet, not ours. It's a Padlet that we've developed in my team over the last couple of years. You'll find this as a one-stop shop. And there's also links in there to signpost to other type of employer engagement services that are out there. For example, the SDN service who Paul, our first speaker, works for. They had quite a large tasked project to develop some employer resources that are out there. So use that Padlet. We're updating it constantly. We're about to just add in some new guidance resources onto that as well, which will support with employer engagement. And I'm really open to any questions, as I'm very conscious of time. We have 2 minutes to go. I would have liked to spend a bit more time on this, but there we go.
Can I say to everyone, I'm going to say, first of all, thank you, Peter. I know that was quick, but that was very helpful, to say the least. We are rapidly running out of time, so we're going to suggest that if you could please complete the evaluation, that would be helpful for us. If any of you want to stay on, and our contributors are happy to stay on the line for a bit, then we can take some questions. Otherwise, we can respond to your comments in the chat via email. So it just remains me to say thank you for coming this afternoon. I think that's been one of our best events for a long time. Very informative, very useful. So if you want to stay on the line, please do so. If you're unable to, leave a question in the chat and we will follow it up. Thank you, everyone. For those of you that are staying, if there is a question in the first instance for Peter or Georgia or Elaine, would is there any questions if you'd like to say? That would be great, thank you.
Hiya, I've got a question. Georgia, hiya. Thanks for your positivity today. You obviously brought something new from being from a recruitment background. So you have no kind of anchors weighed down at this stage. And I think it's great having a fresh approach. You talked a lot about working with Liverpool Community College. So you didn't stand on each other's toes. How did you kind of start forming that relationship? That was an interesting start point for you.
Yeah, so Leeds City College is literally 10 minutes down the road from us. And we knew that they were starting the health course at the same time as us as well. So it was actually the assistant principals that touched base with each other and realised that, you know what's the point in creating rivalry when the NHS is already under so much stress? So it was initially the assistant principals that reached out to each other, and then from there we reached out to the Healthcare Academy in Leeds, who have basically sort of ran with this and are looking to make it sort of around the UK now, because it has worked so well. But we did have to get sort of contracts of agreement with the other college that we were only going to work with each other on so many things. So the curriculum side of things, our teachers all do separate things. They create their own sort of curriculum content. It is purely just the placements and the employability sessions.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you talked in your presentation about contracts, and I wondered how they actually worked, because I love the way that something that's quite novel, and it's a small shift, but it's a really important shift because we have employer boards. You talked about the students being at the employer boards and a showcase day, and I really loved that. And I thought that's a really nice twist. And again, with a fresh set of eyes and no anchors on you at all, you've gone in saying, well, the students should be there as well. I think that's great. And I'm definitely going to take that back. So we have employer boards, but they're a bit stuffy. Tends with the senior management teams. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, what's it got to do with the senior management teams? It is actually everything about the students. So thanks for bringing that right to the forefront of actually it's the students that are important. I love your interview selection. You talked about a contract. What do they learn? Is it a learner contract with the employer? How does that work? That was really interesting.
Yeah, so there is quite a few contracts that we have.
Yeah.
We have a contract that the parents sign of our learners that is agreeing that the student can go on placement. There is no reason why they can't go on placement at these certain dates. For example, the students that are on block placements, the parents can't book a holiday within this time period.
That's really good.
We've also got a student contract where they're agreeing to complete the placement. They know what's expected of them. They know the dates of the placement. And then within that contract, it is also agreeing to complete the 35 hours of employability sessions. It just means that the student has something that if they don't ever attend these sessions, we can then say, well, you sign this contract. Then for employers, they sign an employer agreement contract, which is agreeing to host the student for 315 hours or 750 for the education and childcare. What's required of them. They also sign a contract that's sort of including the health and safety and risk assessment, and that they provide me with their insurance details, and we complete a risk assessment, and we both, Notre Dame and the employer, sign this contract to say, yes, the risk assessment has been completed. Under any circumstances, this is the procedure that we'll follow. Right,
that's, I mean, I don't know if you would want to share that paperwork, but I'd be really interested if you would. I mean, that is just amazing. I mean, Violet, there's my opposite number. Hello, Violet.
Hello. I was very much Antoinette. Can we just? Is there anybody else that has got any questions for anybody? For Georgia, for Paul, for Pete, for Elaine?
I was going to ask Georgia what system she uses there to record the placements and the information.
So this is something that I'm working on. Obviously, budget is a big thing within college. So at the moment, we don't have a system.
Okay.
It's simply spreadsheets, and we have a college system that we use where we can record sort of targets and everything like that. But at the moment, I use spreadsheets to track their employability hours. Working hours whilst they're on placement, I just use Microsoft Forms. The students record the hours that they're in, the amount of hours that they've worked, their shift pattern, and then I can pull this in a report and then send it to their employer to say, have they worked these hours this week? And the employer can sign it off, and then that gets stored in a personal folder for the student. It's basic, but there is platforms out there. Yeah.
We have Connect. We use Connect because we've got 4,500 students. So I need some sort of system.
Yeah. Yeah. I think last year when I just had 2 groups of T levels, it was manageable. This year we're now on 5 T levels courses, up around lower 6. So I'm pushing for a platform.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. I really love it. And thanks for talking us through the contracts. I mean, I've been cheekily put my email address in the chat there. I mean, I'm really interested in how the contracting works, and I love the way that you go about things as well. You know, he talks about the roles of the achievement tutors and what you do. Do you go and see the learners when they're on placement, or is it the achievement tutor? That was a really interesting kind of diagram that you showed us, and I missed the screenshot.
Yeah, so whilst they're on placement, if the achievement tutor will do the 3 check-ins with the student, because they're there for sort of the pastoral wellbeing side of things.
Got you.
Now, if the student has any issues that the employer's flagged up, I will then go out. So, for instance, if they're turning up late daily, and the employer rings me and says, Georgia, they're coming in 2 hours late, can you just have a word? That's where I'll intervene, and I'll step in and say, look, your employer's contacted me. It's sort of that step further. Their achievement tutor is supposed to be the person that they can sort of go to and ask questions, and if they've got any worries, their achievement tutor's there. Whereas if I've got to step in, it's probably for an issue.
Right, I can imagine my work placement officers at Hales Owen College when I worked for them, and they had to deal with everything from being accused of stolen purses and all sorts. I mean, how have you finding?
Sorry, can I just stop you, Antoinette? There, we need to start wrapping up. If we've got any other questions, then we can do it in the chat.
Yep.
Or we can, Roger can answer you directly. I'm just conscious if anybody else has got any questions.
Yeah. I've just put a link in a request in chat for anyone else. So as I've said, we will respond to the questions. We know we haven't covered them all, but we will request them. Are there any other questions?
I've just put the provider insight days on. I know not everybody's on the call at the moment, but we're in the process of organising 20 provider insight days, and Notre Dame is one of them. And these are the ones that we've got confirmed with dates. We have got some others confirmed, but no definite dates. And these events run from 10 till let's say like 2:30. And it's an opportunity to go to a wave 1 or wave 2 provider and, look at how they've implemented T levels, look at how they've spent the specialist equipment allocation, look at the new facilities that they've got through the capital bid. So we went to Notre Dame last year, and it was an amazing day. So these are the ones that we've got confirmed, but we will send these out to you. And our booking system is due to be up and running in the next couple of weeks. So if you want to take any note of those, any dates of those for your diary.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. So I think we'll wrap it up there. We've gone over time. Any further information we will communicate to you via email, and of course we've got our meetings with you in which we can cover more of this should the need arise. So thank you everyone for staying on. We'll bid you good night and we look forward to seeing you in the next webinar in January. And of course, we'll see you in our Keeping in Touch meetings before that. So thank you very much, everyone.